Welcome everybody, another episode today with episode 22. I'm very excited to welcome Florian Kübler from Lend.ch, a P2P lending platform here in Switzerland. And today we have a special guest host, Gabriel Okmian, is joining us here. So welcome everybody. It's as usual, I would like to give the word over to our entrepreneur that is joining us here on the show today. Florian, please.
Hi, thank you very much for having me today. My name is Florian. I'm a local guy here from Zurich. Basically rather average guy, you would say, but made most of my career in the financial markets and had enough of that. So started my own startup together with a few friends, and it's been going very well, and I'm very excited about the whole thing, as much as I'm excited about my family at home with the 2 children that are growing rapidly.
Yes, very interesting. So you came from a very classic Zurich banking job, I would say. Tell a little bit to my audience, what made you change your career path that you decided I want to leave and go build my own startup?
Yes, well basically it's most because the banking environment has changed. So while I was working not only in Zurich but also in London in the financial markets in fixed income, I realized that the whole job of being a credit trader, which was my department, wasn't as much fun as it used to be, and a lot of regulation is coming into the markets. And one way to kind of shape a different product that goes along in a much better way with the regulation that is happening now was to build up a P2P platform. So we decided to do that while we were still working, my colleague Michelle and myself, in 2011. And we built a platform that is predominantly for students to find funding, not from banks, but from other alumni mostly who have gone through the same process at university.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So before we go into the startup, I would like to quickly give to Gabriel the word to briefly introduce himself.
Thank you, Cedric, for having me, and a pleasure also to meet with Florian, whom I know from the banking industry. So just short about myself, I used to work for 5 years in private banking, in Zurich mainly. And for the last 3 years I'm working on the commodity industry, which is obviously also, let's say, a very different working environment compared to the banking industry.
Interesting. Was there for you also some kind of hint or sign that it was time to leave private banking, or it was just more of a passion that you went into commodity trading?
Well, I was still, let's say, very young, or in the beginning of my career, when I got the chance to go into commodity trading. So let's say the timing was not bad to change from the banking industry into commodity trading, where especially in private banking, a lot of new regulations and auditing was going on, and it was, let's say, much more difficult to do business like it used to be. And in commodity trading, we're, let's say, not there yet. It might come in the future, but it's not just numbers. It's, let's say, the physical business, which is very interesting, with shipping and talking to producers and consumers.
Absolutely. So there's a common theme between you guys, is the regulations. The regulations. I mean, you chose an interesting space, but first, give a little bit of a pitch of your startup.
Oh, okay, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. So as I said, in 2011 we started up with a platform that is called Lend.ch, which is only there for student financing. So you're a clever student, but your parents are not wealthy enough to support you as a student, or maybe you're not a poor enough person so that you get scholarship from the government. You kind of fall in between the cracks. And then you do what most students do nowadays. You study a little bit and you work part-time. So a lot of students that you will see, they either serve you at the restaurant, or they work in petrol stations, or do all kinds of odd jobs that basically distract them from their studies and distract them from becoming a better student and finishing off their studies early. So we built this P2P platform. It was more of an idea really, because back in 2011 no one was talking about fintech. So we built the platform while we were still working at UBS and went live with it last summer. And since then we regularly funded students, overall the two combined platforms now approximately around 3 million, where you basically can show who you are, what your interests are, what areas you study, what university you're enrolled at, and then find investors from the private community. So right now, for example, we continuously fund students from University of St. Gallen that we check with the records that they are indeed enrolled at university, and then they show what marks they had, for example, in the bachelor's thesis. And if they're good, investors will come and lend you money at interest rate. The nice thing about Splendid is it's an auction that is going on the interest rate. So the better you are as a student, the more likely you will find investors that bid your interest rate down. We've had 2 students that had an outstanding academic record, next of course to the credit record, which we check also. On the academic record, those 2 persons, they went to do an exchange at Harvard University. They had been handpicked by Harvard to do this exchange, and they of course had great academic records, otherwise you wouldn't be accepted at Harvard. Of course they got excited when they got accepted into Harvard, but they had a fund shortfall of approximately 50,000 Swiss francs, because that's what it costs, and they had no idea how they were going to fund that. They came onto our platform, and within 3 days they were funded. The better one of the 2, I mean the higher academic star, you could say, she got funded for 3 years at 3.5%. Okay. The alternative would have been to go to Harvard and get a loan from Harvard, where for exchange students, if you're not a US citizen, your rate is approximately between 15 and 17%. So it's a much better rate than that. But of course, what's even more important is that you have a network before you even start studying, right? Or before you graduate, because you alumni that know you, the position you're in, and for some of them they have a company or they're entrepreneurs, and if they look to acquire talent, which is very important, we can see it's very difficult to find good people. You have a resource, which is the Splendid database, and you can attract them to work for you.
I mean, if I remember correctly, it's also from the investor perspective, it's much more interesting because they get a higher percentage compared to the bank.
Yeah, of course. It's always difficult, right? What risk and what return. But if you look at what you're receiving, for example, on the Swiss fixed income markets nowadays, it's basically zilch, zero. You have recent issues. Teva Pharmaceuticals issued 3 bonds in Swiss francs, and they all trade at 0%, roughly. So if you add the cost that the bank charges you for having a portfolio with them, you can be sure that you will have a negative return. In our case, all the fees are actually included in the return, so you know exactly how much fees you will have to pay for the platform. And then by the last cent how much money you're getting. We have an account with Zurich Cantonal Bank, so we administer all the payments that the student has to pay regularly to show that he is a good debtor. And then basically we channel all the funds between the lenders and the student, and we deal with all the legal, the credit contract and the loan contract, all these things as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the main criticism I would say you see that a lot in the US is that they finish college or finish graduate school, and then the first thing they have is a big loan that they have to pay back. Is that something you help them? Do you help with job placement, or you guarantee some kind of?
I think we help in 2 ways. The first way is actually, it's a very good point you're mentioning. In the US, the system works as follows. It's basically regardless of what you study, you're entitled to have a student loan at XYZ%. Yeah. With us, if you come on our platform and you say, we had one student, for example, she said she wants to go to hotel management school. That costs a fortune, costs like 60,000 Swiss francs. By Swiss standards, that is a fortune, not by US. So it costs a lot of money, and the job, the career prospects after graduation of that school are not that great. So people know that. Like alumni or investors that lend money to these students, they know that, you know, if you're going to ETH and you graduate in computer science, you're probably more likely to have a well-paid job than if you're going to hotel management school.
Yeah.
So she didn't get funded. So, which is, you could say, bad for her, but maybe it's not that bad because it gives her probably second thoughts about the education that she wants to do. So people know, you know, it's not one bank manager that tells you this education is not good. It's the crowd of investors that lets you know where we like your profile, or actually, you know, we're not too sure you can actually pay back your loan because the job prospects don't look too great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, any questions from you?
No, I think especially what I experienced in the private banking when dealing with customers, let's say, where the profile was more, let's say, income based. So they were looking for bonds which pay, let's say, between 5 and 6%. And nowadays, with the low interest rates, I mean, it's pretty much impossible to do like a good portfolio with good companies where you can invest. So I think let's say the idea of Splendid is great, where you have, let's say, a much better payout for the risk you're taking. And what do you see is like more challenging to get investors these days, or students, or?
It's difficult to find the right students. We get a lot of applications from students that you would just not put on your platform simply because you know they're not going to get funded, and it's not helping the platform. You know, you got to have some quality of students. So, like I said, Splendid is maybe a bit more of a, you know, it's a good story that is growing, but you know, you won't have exponential growth. Whereas in Lend, which is basically the sister platform that is, you know, for refinancing of expensive bank loans, we do see a lot of growth because it's a big market in Switzerland. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the connection is not as close as between a student and an investor, but you still make your average return of 5 to 8%. And that is a very, you know, chunky return for the given fixed income market in Switzerland.
On your platform, I mainly saw students who got funded because they go, as you mentioned, for an abroad study, like for a semester. Because what I see in Switzerland, I mean, if you go to public university, it's not that expensive. So where do you see, I mean, the growth potential for the student platform? Doesn't make it sense more to implement it into the Lend?
Yeah, we will ultimately implement it into Lend. It will stay, you know, more connected, more bilateral kind of feeling between the lenders and the students. And in Switzerland, you do, although it is not expensive in terms of cost of tuition, you see a lot of, you know, applications for scholarships, around 6,000 in Zurich alone every year, because simply people don't have the time to work part-time and study. It really depends. The ironic thing is that the better your profile is as a student that will come onto Splendid, the more likely it is that you will find a well-paying job afterwards. So time-consuming studies like you know, engineering or medicine, you know, your job, it's all in the Federal Bureau of Statistics. The unemployment rate of a graduate after medicine after a year is virtually zero. There's, you know.
Yeah. A little bit, I would like to hear a little bit about your expertise in the P2P market. I mean, like, the whole P2P is definitely a booming idea. There's Lemonade in Israel. I'm not sure if you heard about it. It's a startup that had a very, very big seed round, one of the biggest ones, and they do P2P insurance.
Yeah.
So I would be interested, what do you think is, you know, the future of this P2P in general? Where do you think it's heading? Is that the future of more like everything that we do?
I very much think so, yeah. The reason is because when you look at regulation, banks have, you know, capital requirements that they have to stick to. So if you're lending money to someone, you have to, you know, let's say you're lending 100, you have to keep 20 on your balance sheet, just as, you know, cushion. And it is very likely that that's going to stay or get even, you know, harder. If you're a P2P platform, you don't have this balance sheet requirement because you can simply take money from here and lend it to there. And with all the, changes that we see, data, the whole underwriting process, it's very straightforward. It's not rocket science anymore. So like we said, we've expanded P2P concept from students to everyone. You can expand it to mortgages, you can expand it to car leases, to small and medium enterprise lending. It will definitely grow into these areas. What we're a bit careful about is that you have to be diligent on your underwriting process.
Yeah.
You have to show that you're not lending because the incentive would be there. Well, like our incentive is to have as many borrowers on our platform that pay, but you have to be careful because there are some people that you just shouldn't lend money to.
Interesting. One last question about the Swiss startup industry. Where do you see funding going? Do you think the venture capital funding here in Switzerland is as established as, let's say, Silicon Valley or Tel Aviv? Or
no, of course.
Is it growing? Or what do you see the market?
It's funny. We did our seed round in spring this year, and it took us quite a long time to find our first investor. And once we found the first one, actually we were oversubscribed.
Yeah.
Which is nice. That was a round of 1.7 million. So I think when it comes now to the second round, which we are planning next spring again, that will be a lot more funding, let's say 3 to 5 million. And it can be tricky in Switzerland to find the right investors to fund these deals. What I also find a very big challenge in Switzerland is just the cost. We had a team here from Berlin last week, a designer team. They work for 90 Swiss francs an hour rather than 350 Swiss francs an hour if you took a local one.
Yeah.
And they taught us that the space in Berlin is 25 euros per square meter. Whereas if you cut a very cheap deal in Switzerland, you pay 250 per square meter. So those differences are just insane. Yeah.
Okay, good. So thank you very much, Florian, for giving us this insight into Lend.ch and the industry. Gabriel, thank you very much for co-hosting this show, and have a good day. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Thanks.